This is a word that the Spirit of God hit me with while actually preparing for Bible study out of the book of Acts. And I went in and had it entitled it 50 Pieces of Silver. Just to keep you guessing where I'm coming from. Acts chapter 7, verse 9. And the patriarchs moved within it. This is Stephen's message. This is part of the message, the beginning part of his message before they stoned him. And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt. But God was with him. And that part right there. Sold Joseph into Egypt. Or the world. Or sin. Now, none of us will dispute the fact that Jesus is the Word that was made flesh, correct?
Amen.
Joseph was not Christ. However, the story of Joseph is Christ. After all, we agreed he is the Word.
Yes. Amen.
So, the Lord really showed me that it goes beyond a type. And there's something significant. Genesis chapter 37, verses 27 and 28. This is the story of when Joseph's brothers took him, and at first they were going to kill him, and they decided to throw him into a pit. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brother and his brethren were content. 28. Did you do verse 27?
Yeah, that's there.
Okay. All right. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, peddlers, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now we know that Jesus was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Joseph was sold into Egypt for 20. Now, as I said, Jesus is, the Bible declares, the Word that was made flesh. Joseph was not Christ, but the story of Joseph is Christ as being the Word. And when I read this, I realized, I come to understand that Joseph, as a type of Christ, was sold into Egypt. Jesus, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit because I see eyebrows going up. Jesus was sold into the Jews. $20 pieces of silver were for the Gentile salvation. 30 pieces of silver were for the Jew salvation.
Jesus.
Now, Go back to verse 27, please. Let not our hand be upon him. Now Matthew 27:25. They answered all the people and said, his blood be on us and our children. This is the Jews. Do you see the difference?
Yes.
Joseph, he says, let not our hand be upon him. They didn't want his blood on them. But the Jews said, let his blood be upon us and our children. What kind of person would want to put that responsibility on themselves, let alone their children? They were content he was their brother. But the Jews didn't know Christ was their brother. They didn't take into consideration that he was their brother. Now, Galatians 4:22. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. Ishmael was also blessed of God to be many nations. Isaac was the gift of promise, out of which came Christ. That was the real promise. The real promise was the seed put within Abram in Genesis 17. That was the promise. Many nations. You know, it goes beyond. It goes beyond having babies. It goes beyond just the state of Israel. God told him, count the stars. He couldn't count the stars. That represents the Jew. He told him to count the grains of sand. That represents the Gentile. Those who are born again is what God is considering. This is what He is interested in. Even when He told Adam and Eve to replenish the earth, He was not considering them having babies, but prophetically down the road that the earth be replenished with the glory of God. People who are born of His Spirit.
Yeah. Amen.
20 pieces of silver. This is where it got real interesting. Because, you know, the Hebrew language, the letters are also numerical. When a Hebrew child in school is learning to count, they're also saying the alphabet. It represents their numbers. They don't have 1, 2, and 3 like we do, and A, B, and C. They have Aleph, Bet, 1, 2. That's what they represent. The number 20 is the 11th letter of the alphabet. It's Kaf. It's used as the pronunciation of a K. Now, the word Kaf means a palm, as a palm of a hand. The picture of Kaf is a prostrate king with a crown, as Christ in the tomb. the number, the letter before and the letter after are significant because it notates potential and actual. You know, the Jewish language and the Hebrew study and the rabbis know and understand things that we have no knowledge of. And this is why I personally like to study it. When they say potential and actual, there's an understanding there of that which is within manifest out. The Spirit of God within us being manifest out. When they bless a child, it is with the palm. You see, there's a reason, even in our ignorance, that when we lay hands on somebody, it's with the palm. That which has potential is manifest out. That's number 20. That's the letter Kaf. Now, check this out. The rabbis in the law say there are 4 crowns. The crown of the law, the crown of the priesthood, the crown of the kingdom, and the crown of a good man. And when I looked at that, I said, okay, Lord, I understand. But the crown of a good man. And immediately the Holy Spirit hit me with Psalms 37:23. Go ahead and put that. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Now, in the New Testament, there are 5 crowns. And they're actually named in the Word. First one is James 1:12. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. The next is 2 Timothy 4:8. Henceforth there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give me at the day, and not to me only, but unto all them also that love his appearing. 1 Corinthians 9:25. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. Mark 15:17. Yes, I'm sorry. When the chief shepherd shall appear, he shall receive a crown of glory that fadeth not away. Mark 15:17. And they clothed him with purple, and plaited a crown of thorns, and put it about his head. So there are 5 crowns in the New Testament: life, righteousness, incorruptible, glory, and thorns. There are 4 in the Old Testament: the law, the priesthood, the kingdom, and a good man. That's 9 total. 9, the number 9, represents judgment, or listen, the perfect movement of God. Judgment and the perfect movement of God. When was the last time we said, "Judge me, O Lord"? You see, judgment begins in the house of God.
Amen.
This is where it starts. We must come to the place within ourselves to where we say, "Judge me, God. Judge me." Listen, if we're saying, "Judge me," then we are in no wise going to point a finger at someone else.
Amen.
For with the same judgment, in other words, the same criticalness that you judge someone else, God will judge you on those same terms. Be careful when you're overcritical of another. Because if you're going to put those standards on someone else, then you must live that standard. But the perfect movement of God. Listen to this. This is all that same number 20. The 11th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The word king is Molech. If you put K or Kaf in front of Molech, Kamolech, it is like as. Now listen. It's to liken as or follow. If you put the letter K, which is number 20, after Molech, you have submission to. Revelation 19:16. He hath a vesture, and on his thigh a name written, King
Lord.
of Kings, of Lords. At the same time, he said, "Follow me, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, on earth, above earth, and below earth, that Jesus Christ is Lord." No, every single person. It doesn't matter. You can bow now or you can bow later, but you're going to bow.
Amen.
Amen.
Period.
Amen.
Amen.
But as we follow him, as we liken ourselves unto him, we must also stay in submission to him. Really, isn't this what Jesus did with the Father? He had no problem calling himself the Son of God. You see, in the Jewish mind, for him calling himself the Son of God is saying, "I am equal to God." The word son, or ben in Hebrew, is mature, one who is able to bring forth a lineage. So by saying son, he's saying, "I'm mature and I'm able to bring forth a lineage to my Father, which is God." It puts him on an equal plane. Many times, we are too quick, I think, to call ourselves sons of God, when we're still playing. Paul said, "When I was a child, I did childish things. I spoke as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things." It's time for us as the church to grow and become mature, so that we can, with full assurance and full boldness, say, "I am a son of the Most High God," but yet
Right.
making no reputation for ourselves. You understand? That's exactly what Jesus did. He called himself the Son of his Father, which indeed he was, but he made no reputation for himself.
Amen.
Amen.
He likened himself, Kahmolech. He likened himself as the Father. But at the same time, he was molecha, submissive, broken before the Father. Did you ever think there would be so much in just one number, one letter? This amazes me. This is why I like studying this. Matthew 26:15. And said unto them, this is Judas, what will ye give me? And I'll deliver him unto you. And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Matthew 15:24. Remember the story of the Syrophoenician woman? Her daughter possessed with the devil? She goes up to the disciples. Man, I got to talk to Jesus. You got to get Jesus. My daughter is possessed with the devil. They go in and say, Master, she's bothering us. Send her away. She gets in front of Jesus, tells him her story. And he said, but he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He wasn't sent to the Gentiles. He was sent to the lost sheep of Israel. Then he said, it's not good to give the children's bread to dogs. Interesting enough. Can you imagine Jesus sitting at a table with his disciples and he calls you a dog? The church world today, man, they'd roll up their little shoelaces and wham right out the door. He called me a dog. Boo-hoo. Listen, this was actually a derogatory term that they called Gentiles at that day. Because the Jew mentality was well above everyone else. They served the Most High living God. Jesus walked under the law. We can't forget that. He says it's not good to give the children's bread to dogs. What does she say? Rightly so. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that drop from the master's table. When she said that, in my heart, I can see him being speechless. She didn't need the whole loaf. She knew only a crumb was enough. But listen, he was only sent to the lost sheep of Israel. So the first thing he had to do was he had to bring her into covenant. He brought her into covenant. And he said, go your way. Your daughter's whole. With that established, that Jesus himself was sent to the house of Israel, the lost sheep, betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. Jesus being the Word that was made flesh, as a type in Joseph, was sold into Egypt for 20 pieces of silver. Is this all coming together for you? His brothers didn't want his blood on their hand. Jesus' brothers said his blood be upon us and our children. 20 pieces of silver was the cost for you and I. 30 pieces of silver was the cost for the Jew. So 14th, 12th letter, Lamed, is 30 in Hebrew. It means to teach. It's the tallest letter in the alphabet. If you look at the Hebrew alphabet, Lamed is the tallest letter, and it's the center letter. It represents the King of Kings. If you take the letter before, Lamed, and the letter after, those three letters in Hebrew spell the word king. You know, it's impossible. It is impossible for a Jew to speak a sentence without referencing God. It's their whole alphabet. It's their whole numbering system. Everything holds understanding of who God is and what He is. To teach, it represents being the center of the alphabet, the heart of knowledge. Or you could say heart knowledge. Now, as we know, 20 and 30 equals 50. 50 is the day of Pentecost. 50 is the fullness of the Spirit. I will pour my Spirit upon all flesh. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will dream dreams, and your old men or young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams. I don't dream yet, so I must not be old. Just saying. The number 50 is the 14th letter of the alphabet. Its picture, I tell you, there's no coincidence in these things. Each letter has a pictograph, a picture that represents the letter and number. It amazed me when I looked at the pictograph